Hello and welcome to World Panorama, where we get you a complete roundup of the latest international news stories. I'm Aishwarya Kapoor with you. Let us start the program with this week's top headlines. China expected to give $6 billion in aid to Pakistan as Prime Minister Imran Khan meets President Xi Jinping in Beijing. Facing economic crisis, Islamabad looks to minimize dependence on an IMF bailout package. Brazil becomes the latest country to drift towards the far right as Jair Bolsonaro wins presidential vote. Amid concerns over threat to country's 33-year-old democracy, vows to respect democratic principles. President Donald Trump's immigration push ahead of U.S. midterm elections on 6th of November announces sending 15,000 troops to U.S.-Mexico border to head off a caravan of Central American migrants. Also says will end birthright citizenship with an executive order. Turmoil in Sri Lanka shows no signs of abating. Amid international pressure, President Sirisena summons Parliament on 7th of November to resolve power struggle between two rival prime ministers, Ranil Wickremesinghe and Mahinda Rajapakse. And a black box from an Indonesian Lion Air jet that crashed into Java Sea with 189 aboard found, as authorities look to find out why an almost new plane went down in the sea minutes after takeoff from Jakarta. There were no survivors. The top story this week, new Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan is in China during his first official visit to the country. Now, the visit is seen as vital to Islamabad's efforts to obtain fresh loans. On Friday, Imran Khan met Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing's Great Hall of the People. And Khan said that he had come to China to learn and told Xi of his country's very difficult economic situation. Reports say that China has agreed to provide $6 billion in aid to Pakistan. This includes a loan of $1.5 billion and a package of $3 billion for the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Remember, Pakistan's foreign reserves have plunged 42% since the start of the year and now stand at about $8 billion, or less than 2 months of import cover. Last month, Pakistan received a $6 billion aid from Saudi Arabia, but officials say that it is not enough and the country still plans to seek a bailout from the International Monetary Fund to avert a balance of payment crisis. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan will also attend a China International Import Expo on 5th of November in Shanghai. He will participate in the opening ceremony of the program and deliver a keynote speech.
So if there's one relationship which people of Pakistan have always felt that in our times of need, we can depend on one country, China has always been that country. So we have a very special relationship with China. The people of Pakistan have always looked upon China very positively as a friend.
All right, let's get a perspective on the story. We have with us Mr. Prabhu Dayal, former ambassador, joining us. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us. Sir, Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan is on his maiden visit to China. And of course, there are reports that China is expected to give $6 billion in aid. But what are the other key things that we can take? What are the expectations from this visit of Pakistan Prime Minister to China?
Well, Imran Khan said that if there's one country that Pakistan can always turn to, it's China.
Yes.
Both countries have described each other as all-weather friends. Now, my submission is that the glue which binds Pakistan and China is their deep-seated hostility towards India. Pakistan has been getting funding from all kinds of sources. The Americans were very generous. In fact, they used to be the largest donor. But now President Trump has said that while America gave billions of dollars in aid to Pakistan, in return they gave only lies and deceit. It also got 12 bailout packages from the IMF. It has been getting money from China, from Saudi Arabia. Now, where does this money go? Because the infrastructure is in a pathetic condition. My submission is Pakistan has been spending disproportionate amounts on its defense budget. Even this year, its defense budget has been raised by 20% to $9.6 billion. Now, of course, every country has the right to spend on defense. But in Pakistan's case, a lot of the defense expenditure goes towards lining the pockets, the deep pockets of its generals and senior army officers. And secondly, it goes towards funding terrorist activities against India. You know, there are several heads in the defense budget: transport, medical assistance, rations, training. Now, these are very general heads, and under those heads, expenditure gets to be allocated towards the terrorist-related activities directed against India. My worry is the more money that Pakistan gets from China, the more it will have available to itself towards anti-India activities. Of course, China doesn't really mind that. China has been using Pakistan as a cat's paw against India. While their all-weather friendship will continue, it might just happen at the cost of India.
Absolutely, but how will it impact the China Belt and Road Initiative? Because, you know, there is a package of $3 billion that apparently China is going to give to Pakistan. And at the meeting that Imran Khan had with President Xi, he also, you know, voiced confidence in Belt and Road projects. But at the same time, you know, considering the financial crisis that Pakistan is going through and the broader concerns about China's Belt and Road and debt diplomacy, how do you think it will impact the China's Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, if you recall, Pakistan initially wanted a bailout package from the IMF. It might still go to the IMF. But the IMF wanted very close monitoring of the projects under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor.
Yes.
Because there is growing concern that Chinese funding draws country into economic debts which are in the nature of neo-colonialism, economic colonialism. There are concerns within Pakistan itself that projects under the CPEC are not really in Pakistan's interest because, for instance, their Commerce Minister, Mr. Dayal, was of the view that the projects under CPEC are adversely affecting the interests of Pakistan's companies. Again, the Railway Minister wanted the Karachi-Peshawar rail project to be scaled down. So there are concerns about how it is going to create a greater debt trap for Pakistan, which is not going to be in the interests of that country. Of course, at the moment, their economic crisis is so serious, they are facing a deficit of $27 billion, including $9 billion in debt repayments. So their Prime Minister has had to go with a begging bowl all over the place. He went to Saudi Arabia, got $6 billion, though initially the Saudis were putting very stiff conditions. But after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, they felt diplomatically isolated and have been generous to Pakistan. He's gone again to their all-weather friend China. Economically, the situation will not improve unless Pakistan reorients its thinking, which means learns to spend what is realistically needed for defense and not for purposes such as waging terrorist activities against India.
And what about the impact on China? Because, you know, inside China also, there have been, you know, reports. In fact, analysts are questioning this huge amount of funds that, you know, China is putting into its Belt and Road Initiative, especially the range of challenges that China is facing at home, the economic slowdown, the trade disputes with other nations, and the local government debt. How will it impact China if you look at the internal politics of China?
Well, I think the Chinese will have to rethink a lot because they have been very aggressively pursuing checkbook diplomacy. Of course, this sort of diplomacy serves their strategic interests. For instance, they have been investing heavily in Sri Lanka. They are going to do so in Nepal. And also, they have done that in the case of the Maldives. Of course, Pakistan is their favorite customer, their all-weather friend, as they have called it. And their investments in Pakistan are of a totally different order. I think that what will happen is that Pakistan's inability to repay their debts to the Chinese will begin to become more and more acute, which will make the Chinese hold back. I do not really know how long this sort of very aggressive checkbook diplomacy can go along. But at the moment, it seems that it suits both the sides, both Pakistan and China.
Absolutely, but the choice for Imran Khan is very simple. Either he has to suspend some of the projects which are planned under the CPEC, or get estranged further in the grip of Chinese dragon. Thank you so much, sir, for joining and sharing your perspective on that story. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And on to the other big story this week. Voters in Brazil, the world's fourth largest democracy, have elected a far-right populist as president in the runoff election. Jair Bolsonaro, a former army captain, received 55% of the vote. His election signals the biggest political shift in the country since the end of the military dictatorship in 1985. His win adds Brazil to a growing list of countries from the United States to Hungary to the Philippines, where staunch right-wing nationalists have scored victories at the ballot box. Bolsonaro, however, appeared eager to dispel concerns that he would govern despotically, saying that his government would be a defender of the constitution, democracy and liberty.
Brazil's president-elect Jair Bolsonaro may have been hoping for a warm welcome after his win in the 28th October election, but that was not to be. Thousands of people took to the streets in Sao Paulo to protest, chanting, "Not him." Bolsonaro won 55% of the votes in a runoff election against left-wing hopeful Fernando Haddad of the Workers' Party, who got 45%. Bolsonaro's win in Brazil's presidency has also shocked many, who ask how a candidate with extreme views could command broad popular support.
History is repeating itself. The whole world is warning us, and Brazil has its eyes closed. We always wanted the best for our country, but I still can't see his mandate with good faith.
Though in his victory speech, Bolsonaro told his supporters that he would be a defender of democracy and uphold the constitution, but critics are worried about his comments on race, women and homosexuality. Within minutes of his victory, international rights groups began expressing concerns. Besides, Bolsonaro's continued comments in support of Brazil's military dictatorship, which ruled the country from 1964 to 1985, have added to voter fears that his commitment to democracy is weak. The losing candidate called on Brazilians not to be scared under Bolsonaro's presidency.
I put my life at the disposal of the country. When I look out to the streets of the country, to all regions, I felt an anguish and a fear on the faces of many people who sometimes cried, "Don't be scared, we'll be here, we are together."
Bolsonaro, a 63-year-old former paratrooper, joins a list of populist right-wing figures to win elections in recent years that include US President Donald Trump, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. In office for 8 years, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Brazil's jailed former president and founder of the Workers' Party, pledged to enact radical change through sweeping social reforms. But he failed to deliver and left a trail of disillusionment in his wake. Experts say many of those who backed Bolsonaro did so not because they admired him or his policies, but out of determination to punish the Workers' Party for years of misrule. In one of his first major announcements, Bolsonaro called for looser gun laws, urging a high-profile anti-corruption judge to join his government and promising to cut government advertising for media that lie.
Chega de mentira. Enough with the lying, enough with the fake news. I want to govern for everyone in Brazil, not only for those who voted for me. We have a constitution that really has to be our Bible, because only in this way we'll be able to live in harmony.
Besides showing his detractors that he is indeed the right choice as the custodian of the world's fourth largest democracy, There are other tasks cut out for Bolsonaro, who takes office on 1st January next year. He will have to reassure international investors that he is up to the job of righting Brazil's finances. A looming $34 billion deficit in 2019 has economists warning that without drastic spending cuts or substantial tax increases, the country is only a year or two away from a full-blown crisis. Bolsonaro must also address many other issues with no easy solutions, including high unemployment, increasing crime rate in a nation that is already the world leader in total homicides, and deep divisions after years of political turmoil. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And 1 week before midterm elections in the United States, President Donald Trump unveiled tough new proposals on immigration. Donald Trump blasted a caravan of migrants from Central America that is hundreds of miles from the U.S. border, threatening to send up to 15,000 troops to guard the border with Mexico. He also talked about an executive order to stop birthright citizenship, despite legal scholars who say he cannot. Now, analysts say that immigration is important to Donald Trump's base of most ardent supporters and is likely to juice Republican turnout for the 6th of November elections.
Ahead of the US midterm elections, President Donald Trump drew a hard line on immigration. He announced this week that the number of military troops deployed to the US-Mexican border could reach 15,000, roughly double the number the Pentagon said it currently plans. The troops to the US-Mexican border are being sent to head off a caravan of Central American migrants.
As far as the caravan is concerned, our military is out. We have about 5,008. We'll go up to anywhere between 10 and 15,000 military personnel on top of Border Patrol, ICE, and everybody else at the border. Nobody's coming in. We're not allowing people to come in.
A caravan of Central American migrants estimated to number at least 3,500 people left in mid-October, but is still nearly 1,600 kilometers from the US border and would take weeks to reach the US. Several smaller groups, estimated at a combined 1,200 people, are farther away. Critics say that deploying thousands of troops to the border with Mexico was a political stunt. A deployment of 15,000 troops would be roughly equivalent to the size of the US military's presence in Afghanistan and 3 times the size of its presence in Iraq. Trump's announcement came as Mexico also cracked down on migrants attempting to cross its own porous southern border.
With the roughness of these people in the second caravan that's been forming, and also, frankly, in the first caravan, and now they have one forming in El Salvador, and we are thinking very seriously, immediately stopping aid to those countries, because, frankly, they're doing nothing for the American people.
With his eyes squarely on Tuesday's contests, Trump has rushed a series of immigration declarations, promises and actions as he tries to mobilize supporters to retain Republican control of Congress. His own Republican campaign in 2016 concentrated on border fears, and that was his focus in the final week of the midterm fight.
Immigration is one of the most important topics and issues for the Republican voters. A poll places immigration as a top issue for the voters, and actually we see it that in the border states specifically, Republican voters have the intention to go out next week to vote.
This week, Trump also told a news website that he wants to remove the right of citizenship for children of non-citizens born in the United States, which was written in the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution. He claims he can do that with an executive order, a view at odds with most legal scholars. If implemented, a presidential order's legality would eventually be decided by the Supreme Court.
Now, how ridiculous. We're the only country in the world where a person comes in, has a baby, and the baby is essentially a citizen of the United States for 85 years with all of those benefits. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And it has to end.
Trump and many top aides have long seen the immigration issue as the most effective rallying cry for his base of supporters. And now they're increasingly trying to cast midterm election as a referendum on immigration. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
On 26th of October, Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena removed his United People's Freedom Alliance from the country's national unity government. He also appointed a new Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa. The problem arose when the ousted Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who leads the United National Party, refused to leave the office. And to boost Rajapaksa's candidature, a lawmaker from the main Tamil party defected to the Premier's side and was made a minister, even as President Maithripala Sirisena agreed to summon Parliament on 7th of November for a floor test to end the political turmoil. However, Sri Lanka continues to remain in political and economic uncertainty. Here is a detailed report.
Amid political deadlock in Sri Lanka, President Maithripala Sirisena summoned the parliament to meet next week, hours after officials at new Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa's office indicated that the House will meet next week. In a dramatic turn of events, President Sirisena had on October 26 dismissed Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and his cabinet and replaced him with former President Mahinda Rajapaksa. The act heightened political turmoil in the country, as Wickremesinghe maintains that he is still Prime Minister and not Rajapaksa, who lost in 2015 general elections to his rival and current President Maithripala Sirisena. Wickremesinghe, however, argues that he cannot legally be removed until he loses the support of Parliament and call for a floor test to prove his majority. President Sirisena had suspended Parliament till November 16th after Wickremesinghe sought an emergency session to prove his majority.
All political parties, government officials, religious leaders and the people as a whole to unite behind the new government of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa.
The political crisis turned violent when one person got killed when a sacked cabinet minister tried to re-enter his office. Members of trade unions linked to the new Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa had blocked ministers from the old cabinet from entering their ministries. Effigies of Sirisena were torn up in a symbolic protest against the president's move, which has been described by many local newspapers as a constitutional coup. Human rights groups, meanwhile, have also raised the alarm over Rajapaksa's return to power, pointing to allegations of war crimes against ethnic Tamils, as well as harassment and arrests of journalists, activists and dissenters during his decade-long rule.
In the afternoon, we were informed by the workers that the former minister Arjuna Ranatunge was trying to take away files from his office. We as trade unionists came to the ministry. While we were trying to talk with the workers to sort it out, he ordered his security to shoot at the workers. The two workers were shot in the chest.
The president is facing increasing political and diplomatic pressure to reconvene parliament as soon as possible. The US State Department has called on President Maithripala Sirisena to immediately reconvene parliament to allow representatives there to quell a constitutional crisis sparked by the Prime Minister's sudden sacking. A group of ambassadors from UN, EU, Britain, Canada and Germany also met with the Speaker at Parliament and expressed concern over the unexpected political developments in Sri Lanka. The UN Secretary General too has expressed great concern over the deepening political crisis. Tensions have been building between Sirisena and Wickremesinghe for some time, as the president did not approve of economic reforms introduced by the Prime Minister. Sirisena was also critical of investigations into military personnel accused of human rights violations during Sri Lanka's long civil war, which ended in 2009. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
News from Indonesia, which saw a huge tragedy this week after a budget airline Lion airplane crashed into the sea, killing all 189 on board. One black box and a cockpit voice recorder has been found as authorities race to determine why the brand new Boeing crashed minutes after takeoff. Reports have emerged that there were problems with the jet's previous flight. It is almost a week since Indonesia's Lion Air plane crashed into the Java Sea, killing all 189 people on board. But the search mission continues with 5 helicopters, 45 Navy vessels and rescuers keeping on with the mission. Among them are 78 divers in the search mission on the sea floor, about 500 meters northwest of the location where the pilot of the JT610 flight last communicated with the air traffic control. On Thursday, one of the 2 black boxes was found, and on Friday, one of the cockpit voice recorder was discovered. However, it could take up to 6 months to analyze data from the black boxes.
Well, it's different. The downloading itself can be one day, but the analysis can be lengthy, depends on the cases.
The plane carrying 189 people crashed soon after taking off from Jakarta, the Indonesian capital, on Monday. It plummeted into the Java Sea. No survivors have been found, nor has the body of the Boeing 737. The plane was making a 1-hour journey to the western city of Pangkal Pinang when it went down. The pilot had asked air traffic control for permission to turn back to the airport, but then contact was lost. So far, 65 bodies of the victims have been found.
We as the family members appreciate the efforts and the reports from the search and rescue agency. But what is important to us is getting more information about the victims, because having their remains back is important for us, so we can bury them properly.
Meanwhile, reports have emerged showing the plane experienced technical problems while flying from Bali to Jakarta the previous day. The log shows one instrument was giving unreliable airspeed readings and the captain had to hand over to the first officer. Altitude readings also differed on the captain's and first officer's instruments. Lion Air, a budget airline based in Indonesia, has acknowledged a technical problem occurred on the penultimate flight but said it was resolved. Meanwhile, Indonesia's National Transportation Safety Committee held closed-door meeting with the representatives of Boeing Company and the officials of the US National Transportation Safety Board, requesting them to assist Indonesia in carrying out investigations into the crash.
We will let Transportation Safety Committee to do their job, and we have requested Boeing to help to determine the criteria needed for inspection to find out the cause of crash.
What is most shocking, however, is that single-aisle twin-engine passenger jet was manufactured this year itself and was put into operation only in mid-August. This is the worst airline disaster in Indonesia in more than 2 decades and has renewed concerns about safety in its fast-growing aviation industry, which was recently removed from European Union and US blacklists. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And that's all in this edition of A World Panorama, but we leave you with the visuals of Halloween celebrations from Bolivia. The day is observed in several countries on 31st of October, the eve of a Western Christian feast of All Hallows Day. It begins the 3-day observance of All Hallowtide, the time in the church year dedicated to remembering the dead, including saints or hallows and martyrs. Halloween activities include trick-or-treating, attending Halloween costume parties, carving pumpkins into jack-o'-lanterns, lighting bonfires, telling scary stories and watching horror films. So take a look at these visuals as I take your leave. See you next week in another edition of A World Panorama. Bye-bye.